Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, Ukraine War Frontline update for the 22nd of September 2023. It's going to be a very quick video. I always say that. And it never is. But this should be because there's really very little information coming out from the front line. If you don't know my maps, if you don't understand what each of the colours means on my map, please pause the video and check out the legend. And you can look at the key as well. Yeah. So we'll go to my map, and it's as due to my great preparation, completely wrong place. Right, so this is what it looks like from afar. We have a few pins on there, a few red pins. I don't think that's too much to worry about if you are pro-Ukrainian, though. Okay, we're going to go to the northeast sector, and as you can see, no change to the front line there. Up in Kupiansk, we do have Suryat maps talking about Sinkivka. So Sinkivka is there. Now, if you remember, Suryat map some time ago, the pro-Russian mapper had Sinkivka, pretty much completely surrounded this town there just on the way to Kupiansk, with the Russians way out here, and then had to dial it back after evidence sort of came out that wasn't the case. Well, some video evidence that is being used by Suryat Maps here, saying recent video footage shows the Russian army shelling Ukrainian army positions in the town of Sinkivka, which confirms Ukrainian forces have presence in the northern part of the town too. And nothing that anyone's particularly doubted, apart from there were claims that the Russians, and this is going back some weeks, I think, was Rebar making the claims on the map, and maybe Suryat Maps as well, possibly hinting that the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians back, but that doesn't seem to be the case in Sinkivka. So no change there, but just an element of reality from Suryat Maps to show that the Ukrainians haven't been pushed out of Sinkivka and are still in the northern parts. Right, ISW, Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, states of this area. I mean, the usual kind of repelled attacks here and there. Another Russian mill blogger claimed on September the 20th that unspecified Russian airborne VDV units have been pushing Ukrainian forces from positions in the forests west of Crimea over the past week. Ukrainian Deputy Director of the Department of Application Planning, the Main Directorate of the Ukrainian National Guard, goodness me, long title, Colonel Mykola Urshilovich, stated yesterday that Russian forces are reinforcing forward tank and assault units in the Kupiansk and Liman directions. So we have heard there are 110,000 Russian troops in this area, including all types of troops, rear troops, assault troops, HR, cooks, mechanics, the whole lot. But they are reinforcing supposedly elements in the Kupiansk direction and Liman direction, that the VDV might be operational in, so the paratroopers, elite troops in the Serebiansky forest, although there are claims about VDV being here, there and everywhere, and I don't know that it's particularly worth noting that they're VDV anymore. I think there's been such force dilution in terms of being reconstituted and being reconstituted from mobilized, as I've said many times, but I have to repeat myself for new viewers. What traditionally has happened with VDV troops, elite troops, is you take the cream of the best soldiers from other units who are already being trained, are already fighting soldiers and whatever, and you take the best of them, and then you take them across to your, say, VDV or Marines or whatever, or particularly VDV paratroopers. But in times of war, where you've had certain units reconstituted a number of times, then that's just not possible. So you're actually reconstituting with mobilized troops. So you're not taking the best of the best. You're just taking anyone you can get and then putting them into your VDV, and that dilutes the force quality of those units. So that's, I think, where they're at. So I don't know that it makes... I mean, there will be elements of experienced, decent troops in those units, but it's not quite what they would have been at the beginning of the armed conflict here. Right, okay, Bakhmut, what do we have to say about that? We're going to go to... just to say here as well, of that northern sector. Leonid Pasechnik claimed that Russian forces, including elements of the LNR Second Army Corps, so this is a Russian source, repelled 15 Ukrainian attacks against Russian positions in Luhansk Oblast in the last week. So that's not, I mean, it just shows how quiet it is. That might sound a lot, 15 attacks in the last week, but that's 7 days, 15 Ukrainian attacks. I mean, that's the sort of, at the height of the war, at different times during this war, that's how many attacks you'd see in a day down this front. So that I think signifies that it's pretty quiet. Anyway, as I said, Bakhmut. And the ISW says of Bakhmut, it says quite a bit, but I'm only going to say this from their section. Yevlash, so Ukrainian spokesman, stated yesterday that Ukrainian forces achieved unspecified success near Avdiivka, Avdiivka, and Kurdyivka. Now, this is exactly, they're just reporting what I told you yesterday, so this is not new news, but just to say that there's unspecified success for the Ukrainians apparently around the south of Bakhmut area. You've got Klishchivka, you've got Avdiivka, and you've got Kurdyivka, possibly towards Avdiivka, but that's exactly what I said yesterday. Okay, so here we do have some success for the Ukrainians. This might have been updated on yesterday's map. It came through before I did my mapping yesterday. It's within the last 24 hours, but I will tell you anyway. So, situation south of Bakhmut. After the recapture of Klishchivka, Ukrainian army made small advances north of the town and close to the railway. So they are continuing to push the Russians back in these key areas close to the railway. In other places, they are pushed back to the railway, and still others past the railway, possibly. For example, between Avdiivka here and Kurdyivka to the south. The railway is quite an important sort of scare quotes natural barrier. It's an embankment with tree lines both sides of it, and that's in those tree lines you've got sort of dugouts. So in the embankment you've got tunnels and dugouts. So it is quite a difficult thing to take. But I think once it's been breached in a couple of places, then it's just a matter of time. Again, not too much information coming out of anywhere, at least for Bakhmut. So yeah, we'll move on, and we'll go next to, well, there's not too much to say about Avdiivka. No advances. As you can see, a very low information count for that sector. So we're going to go now down to the Velika Novosilka. Now, I said this morning, so just to let you know where we are, we're on the Eastern Front. We're going to go down past Avdiivka. Nothing happening there. Just by Krasna Horifka. If you remember, there is a mine at Krasna Horifka that was taken by the Russians, but they took some really heavy losses in doing so. There's some amazing footage, drone footage of Russian convoys being really heavily taken out on the way to that mine. And then when the Russians did get to the mine, they were pummeled by artillery. And I think eventually, I mean, there were claims that they kind of lost it. Then sometime later, they appeared to still be there, and then they were taken out by Ukrainian tanks. Anyway, Andrew Perpetua has got a gain there that includes the mine, and not as charitable as Syriac maps with a much larger area of the field. Remember, along this tree line, we had nocturnal footage of a whole group, a drone group, I think, who were taken out by cluster munition, and in that drone group was a drone kind of operator commander person who was also Telegram, quite big on Telegram, and Donbass. What's his name? Donbass. I can't remember. Anyway, he was killed in that instance. So there's been quite a lot of, I guess, activity around here. Not always successful for the Russians. They have taken ground, but previously that's come at quite a cost. Well, it appears that the mine is now back under Russian control, as according to both those mappers there. So that is a little bit of a change that isn't reflected in the ISW as far as I can make out there. It talks about Mariinka, but not, although it mentions Krasna Horifka, that's, a bit general. So it could be that they're referring to, but no detail about that. Okay, we'll come on to now Velika Novosilka. Now, what I was going to say, I spoke to you this morning about this, and potentially there are rumours that some of the troops around this salient, the Velika Novosilka salient, Ukrainian troops might be being pushed westwards to fight and pile into this one sector rather than split the forces over several. I'm not sure of the truth of that. But bear that in mind. That was kind of what NATO and the US were suggesting should happen. Pick one place and absolutely pile into it, burst through all the defenses. You will take losses, but that'll be the best use of resources. I don't think Ukraine is particularly like the idea. They tried doing that a little bit at the beginning. The Amala Tokmachka and took heavy losses and said, no, we're not going to do that. It's all right for you to offer our lives to be sacrificed at the altar of territorial gains, but they didn't want to do that. But actually, there might be some rationale in that. They do desperately need to break these defensive lines in a serious way somewhere, at least. And I guess there's more chance of doing it here, although it's also the most heavily defended area too. As we can see, Novomayorska has been returned to control of the Russians by the looks of both mappers here. Ukrainians might have been pushed back a little bit behind the Shatanka River, but nonetheless, the gains that the Ukrainians did have seem to have been reversed. But then I was claiming that they were only sort of reconnaissance in force, small platoons going in from house to house and then pulling back out. Although by all accounts, or at least according to Avdiivka Perpetua, the Ukrainians did lose quite a bit of equipment in doing that quite often, and I'm sure we saw it actually in Novomayorsk going back about a month, bringing vehicles full of troops up and then just running into. There was that one striker APC that looked like it went into 5 different mines, and then still everyone got out the back. So it's quite incredible. But there is, I think, a bunch of equipment that has been lost just in delivering the troops, not necessarily in doing any fighting themselves as kind of fighting vehicles. Right, let's go to the ISW. Say another Russian mill blogger claimed that fighting is ongoing north of Zavitne-Bezhyanya. So there are claims that there's still activity, unsuccessful fighting or attacks at Pryutne, Staromyorska, and Zavitne-Bezhyanya. So Zavitne-Bezhyanya is this the place next in line down the river that is protected somewhat by the meandering river. It's on the other side, whereas Uruzhaina was on. But it's difficult to say. So this is why you do it in the direction that they flow, because so we have that's 112 meters. That's what's that? 115. So is it flowing south to north? 108 meters. It looks like it, doesn't it? So if it's the direction of a river, the direction it's flowing gives you the coordinate or the position. Yeah, it does look like it's flowing from south to north. Okay, if that's the case, then this is the left-hand side, left bank of the river, and that is the right bank of the river, and that then allows you to give consistent directions, given that it meanders all over the shop. So if you're going to say the north bank, well, that's the different bank depending on where you are on the river, because as you can see here, the north bank here, it might be a different bank to the north bank there, right? So that's actually the other side of the river. So north, you can't use compass points to give directions on a river. Well, you can, but it's just not very useful sometimes. So anyway, with all that being said, Zavitne-Bezhyanya is on the left bank of the river as we go south to north, and that therefore is protected from the Ukrainian forces that appear to be on the right bank of the river, at least here. Like up here, they're on both sides, but as it comes down here, they're on the right bank, and so therefore getting to Zavitne-Bezhyanya is difficult. I presume this bridge has been taken out there, and that means that in order to get there with mechanized equipment, they need to, ford the river. They need to, bridge across the river at some point. So it's slightly more difficult, and I think they took that time before trying to take that on to refit and rotate, but that's taken an awful long time, and they've not done anything particularly big since then. There are claims that there's still activity around there, but there are also rumours that it might be moving westwards to help pile into this sector, which is the Robotna sector. Okay, let's go and pop into the sources around here. So Suryak Maps, a pro-Russian mapper, says around here, I think this is really significant. that they are moving southwards down this manned trench line. You can see the blue control zone for Surat maps has them down to about there, and maybe along to about there. Some others have them closer into Verbove. So they say that Ukrainian army made small advances south of Robotna and southwest, so that's here as well, and southwest of Verbove along the Russian main defense line. So here is where that there were those, I called it the alien head, but you got these trenches dug in between Novoprokopivka and Robotna, and the Ukrainians had taken it being quite difficult for them to take control of those, but they finally did. I think Surat maps, I think they did that some time ago, and Surat maps is just a bit slow with those claims. According to Global War Monitor, there is success aligning with what Surat was just saying in the Verbove area, with Ukraine liberating 0.6 square kilometers of land, and we have here on the other side of Robotna, a Global War Monitor saying yesterday that more positions of Ukraine were noted along the west of Robotna. So that is over here, where, as you can see, Deep State map has a very small amount of Ukrainian gains. It literally is just that triangle there, and pushing the Russians back in that area. And Surat maps, as we've already seen, has gains around there and gains around here too. But that's could well be just what the gains were claimed as being yesterday by the other mappers. Quite a big difference south of Robotna between the Russian mapper Surat maps and the Ukrainian mapper Andrew Perpetua there. I would side with Perpetua because he looks more at objective evidence like shelling satellite imagery. Right, and indeed, Perpetua says, I've updated my map for today. This is yesterday, so this is showing that there is quite a bit of activity moving down that trench line in this area here, the manned trench. It's slow, it's grinding. They are using mechanized equipment in this area there between the tank ditch and the manned trench line, as I talked about yesterday. Right, and finally, I mentioned this in my video this morning, but there is a Wall Street Journal article that's talking about the kind of gains being made by the Ukrainians in this particular region. Ukrainian forces have breached the main Russian defense line in the southeast of the country with armored vehicles, a significant milestone in a 3.5 month counteroffensive aimed at cutting Russia's occupying army into. Ukrainian troops overcame anti-tank obstacles, including ditches and Dragon's Teeth near the village of Verbove in Zaporizhia, allowing armoured vehicles to press through. Open source intelligence assessments of Russian videos showing artillery strikes on Ukrainian vehicles appear to confirm the breakthrough. The breach is small and heavily contested. The Russians are hammering the area with artillery and launching counterattacks. Ukrainian units are taking heavy casualties. That's the claim. But if the Ukrainians can establish a firm foothold, they could seek to drive more armoured vehicles through the gap and punch into less heavily fortified areas. We are pushing through, the Ukrainian officer said. We are destroying them, but the price, ... So at what cost does this come? And that's kind of going back to the whole US-NATO approach, which is you need to punch through, take those hits, but eventually it will pay off. Still incremental advances. There's not a lot of information coming out from there, and we're going to now just pop over to here, and I'm not quite sure what that is about on Andrew Perpetua's sort of mapping pin. That might be a little bit out of place. It might have just flown across the river. I think JR did the mapping there, so I'm just going to check with Andrew Perpetua. I only say that because if I would have known myself if I'd changed it, and I haven't actually changed it, so I don't know, so bear with you. Actually, I just think that's a stray pin that I haven't deleted, so apologies for that. And by the way, just massive thanks to JR. Like, without his help, I would really be struggling in terms of time. I mean, goodness me, time is like gold dust for me. Anyway, that's that, which is not an awful lot to talk about. Anyway, let me know if there's any further information you think I've missed in the threads below. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share, and I'll speak to you a bit later. Toodle pips. If I can stop the video.